A good vaccine has to have three things coming together. One is a good platform. Then you have put the right payload into that platform. And the third thing was, where do you put it? In which patients do you put it? We were just by chance planning our fundraise at JP Morgan 2023, and the top line data went out at the end of 22. So that was quite a nice message to start with.
The world was a bit less open. Croatia was not part of Europe.
We were coming out of the war. If I knew at the time all of this, I would probably maybe be intimidated. But when you're young and you just don't know any better, you're kind of naive and you're like, well, that sounds like a great school and I have good grades and, I will go and take a couple of tests and fill a few forms and go for it.
Bienvenue to a new episode. I'm your host, Philip, and on this show, I'm interviewing the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. Cancer vaccines went through a hype cycle. They were super hot 7-10 years ago in the immuno-oncology wave, to a bit out of fashion, to now back hot again. In 2015, Nouscom was founded, and a few months later, Marina joined and ultimately has been CEO for several years now. So I went to Basel to talk with Marina. Marina was recommended to me by one of her investors, and she really has an inspiring story from growing up in Croatia just after the war, to studying and working in the US, to now being, in 2024, one of the 11% female biotech CEOs in biotech in Europe. So we talked about obviously cancer vaccines and Nouscom, like a platform, and we also talked about the importance of focus and capital letters, as well as her career. So here's my conversation with Marina, and if you're enjoying it, please hit the like, follow button. All right, so welcome to the show, Marina.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to meet you, and we talked, we tried it, and it's great to meet you now.
Yeah, it worked. The third time is a charm.
As we said, a lot of traveling and the traveling season.
Indeed.
So I want to start with the cancer vaccines field. I mean, I think you are one of the leading company worldwide, and especially in Europe. There is also Nycode, where Agnete wasn't sure. We talked about it since the episode. Yeah. And also biotech. I think they just announced positive results on one of their mRNA vaccines at ESMO. So I'm just wondering if you can, how do you position yourself compared to the others? Yeah.
No, that's a great question. And I'm thrilled to be here talking about cancer vaccines when the vaccines have been finally validated for different technologies. I've started working in a space back in 2016 when I joined Nouscom. And at the time, the field was very hot, right? Because after the past not very great successes, we came upon the field of neoantigens and checkpoint inhibitors and the synergies between the two. And a lot of new companies were being formed around that time, including BioNTech and Moderna, focusing at that time on cancer vaccines, so much before they became famous for being, these big COVID companies. And then it took a while to, for those to find the way. And what I usually tell to investors and, general audience is a good vaccine has to have three things coming together. One is a good platform. And here is where different technologies differ. And I never thought, and I don't believe that there is one platform that is going to be it. The winner takes it all, but there will be always space for more. We have a platform that differs from both Nycode, obviously, and RNA. We can talk about that in a bit, but that's important, right? You got to have the good platform that can induce good immune response. Then you have put the right payload into that platform. And here is also where different companies took different approaches to select the neoantigens. The first selection is either off the shelf or individualized or personalized. Exactly. And we did both. And we actually did it in a different order than most other companies. So most companies actually went with a personalized program first and then build various off-the-shelf program. We actually did it in the other way, and I can elaborate on that shortly. And we also tested a personalized vaccine. And the third thing, which I think people really didn't think of in the beginning, was where do you put it, right? In which patients do you put it? Because you can have a great drug, but if you put it into the wrong patient population, it won't work. And I think some of the vaccines that are out there that have shown great activity in, for example, adjuvant setting, didn't show similar levels of activity in metastatic setting. So really the place for vaccines, at least with some technology, seems to be in this lower disease burden. So like if you look across those three areas, then various technologies differ between which platform they use and why that platform induces good quality immune response and what kind of neoantigens they present to the immune system, and then where do they actually test that.
I remember. I remember we talked about like that about where the most efficacy is in the patient section, and that seems like on very late stage patients seems to be working less well versus going early, but that going early is also very hard from a clinical trial setting and enrollment. So how do you do it for your phase 2?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So we actually run a phase 2 study at the moment in first line and the frontline metastatic cancer patients who are positive for a mismatch repair deficiency. So that's a subset of colorectal cancer patients. And we went to this population based on very encouraging phase 1 data that was published and which was basically used in our recent fundraising. So again, because our platform is really potent in inducing strong and durable and specific phenotype of T cells, we have found mechanistic evidence that shows that you can induce vaccine-specific T cells in the periphery, which then traffic to the tumor and kill it, right? Even if the significant mass is there. So, of course, the phase 1, it's a phase 1. You find your dose, you determine safety and immunological activity and a hint of efficacy, a signal of efficacy. And then you have to demonstrate it that the proof is there. And that's exactly what we're doing right now with the Series C. So that's on one hand. And so on the other hand, we have with the same asset, which we call Nouscom. This is an off-the-shelf program that is built on the selection of 209 neoantigens. We also are testing...
It's a lot of neoantigens.
It's a lot of neoantigens.
Compared to others as well.
Exactly. And this is one of the things that really differentiates us from pretty much anybody in the field. Most companies go for 20. I think Moderna goes for 30-some, 33, 34. We can deliver 60 in each of our vectors. So our platform is viral vectors. Two different viral vectors, which are specifically engineered so that they are replication incompetent. They basically are used to deliver the payload. And the capacity of those vectors is larger than most other modalities, most other technologies in the field. And with the 209, we actually developed this program to have 4 of these vectors made and then mixed as a one vaccine. So the patient still gets one vaccine, but it's from the 4 vectors. And there
4 times 60, around 200.
Well, exactly.
200. Okay. Yeah.
Minus space for some other things that make the vaccines work as well as they do. Exactly. And there was a lot of discussions early on before we even went into the clinic. You know, why do you need more, or do you need to perfect these algorithms to give you a very good subset of 10 or 20, right? Because the first vaccines went out with even 10, and then eventually 20, and 20 is, I think, the most common number. And our approach, or you can even call it philosophy, was, well, if you give more information to the immune system, you have better chance of actually catching the immunogenic ones. And various algorithms were developed. I think each company has its own flavor of how you predict these neoantigens. And by that, I mean, are they going to be immunogenic once they reach the patient? And one thing that I think can be said with certainty for all of them is that no algorithm is perfect, right? They do their job and their job pretty well, but no algorithm will give you 20 out of 20 immunogenic neoantigens. So our approach was always, well, the more you give, the more chance you have to really hit the right ones or the really immunogenic ones. And we have seen in some of our clinical data later that even neoantigens that are selected or prioritized down the list close to 60, in fact, were immunogenic. So if you cut your selection in 20, you wouldn't have caught them.
Yeah, okay, because you're talking just for, or maybe also for the audience, the algorithm is when you go for a personalized approach, you try to predict, or you try to, I guess you go from a sample to predict which neoantigens will be the most potent.
The most potent.
And then you've quite some bioinformatics behind.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Exactly. But in fact, the same principle applies, to, in our case at least, to an off-the-shelf selection. The only difference is that in addition to the algorithm being different, you pre-select and then you use that selection for all patients of a certain class. In the personalized, you do the vaccine for every patient as they come. But the principle is similar. We went for this wide selection of 209, not believing that every patient will have 209 active frame shifts or these frame shift neoantigens, but in fact that the sharedness of these neoantigens will be sufficiently high that the vaccine will truly be off the shelf, but universal for this subpopulation of patients.
I mean, and it's, I guess, from like for cell therapy, I guess the personalized approach, I mean, makes sense from efficacy point of view, but from a CMC and I mean, then becomes rapidly, I mean, high cost and quite tedious to do. Yeah. So I guess for you guys, it's an advantage to be able to go off the shelf from the beginning.
That's certainly
it's a big advantage.
Yeah, it's one of the advantages because as you rightfully say, you pre-make the lots and then you fill the vials and then you ship them and patients who are coming into your trial, as long as they have the biomarker, which is this mismatch repair signature, they are candidates for the vaccine. And we expect to find, and we do find, a subset of the 209 in all of them.
Yeah, okay. And then the trial, I saw that it's a pretty large trial, over 100 patients, and the global trials, I think you have 40 centers, something in the US, I mean, mostly US and Europe.
Yep.
And it's a combination with Keytruda, right? Like, so can you tell a bit more about the trial of what's public?
Sure. Yeah, we can. I'll try. So you're right in that our trial is a combination of the vaccine and Keytruda versus Keytruda. Yeah. And the reason for that is because Keytruda is an approved standard of care in this patient population of newly diagnosed colorectal cancer patients who have the mismatch repair deficiency. So in immuno-oncology, the sort of single-arm trials get you only so far, right? You can learn, as I said, some of the early stuff about the safety of the product, the activity, immunological activity, and a signal of efficacy. But if you really want to demonstrate efficacy, you have to go for a randomized approach. And so we, as you said, we are running a global trial in US and Europe with a little over 40 sites, I believe 6 countries. So it's quite a meaningful clinical operation. And we are doing quite well operationally, executionally. The proceeds from our Series C have certainly allowed us to push that and to bring that operation to where we want it to be so that we can see the data readout next year.
Okay. Yeah, because the data readout, was it planned for Q1 or? or somewhere where it was March 2025.
In the Q1,
Primary,
Q2. Yeah, sometime in the first half of next year.
And you will be on time for on.
We are on time.
You're on time. Yes, like a Swiss clock.
We're like a Swiss clock. Although we're a global biotech, but we have some Swiss DNA.
Swiss DNA, yeah.
Yeah.
Something we could. I heard you are a lot of Swiss are very famous for being focused, but I think they're quite famous for being focused, but to do a very focused and lean operation. So, and I want to jump on this a bit later. Maybe to zoom out a bit, one thing you mentioned about that the field was very hot, and then went a bit less hot. I think there are some, if I remember well as well, like I remember CureVac at, I think it was JPM 2017 or something. They had like a phase 2 cancer vaccine that didn't work, I think, at all. And there were some setbacks, but I think recently you had some more positive news as well. I think at least the Moderna combination was also, I think, was also a Keytruda, right? The cancer vaccine that had like, I don't remember the results, but was like really significant activity and significant combination. So can you tell a bit more on what on top of that of like what were the specific, I don't know if it's catalyst the right word, but the specific things that happened?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's a great question. So in my experience, as I said, I started this journey when the field was getting really hot because of the neoantigens. And in fact, for a while, and a while is like a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, people were talking only about neoantigens. And I remember telling everybody, but you need to have a platform to deliver those neoantigens, right? Like neoantigens are one part of the equation. You actually have to have the right platform. So the early clinical data with neoantigens were not so positively received because you could see immunological activity, but there was no clear correlation with clinical activity or efficacy. And that's what confused, right, the field and the investors. And then people tried to find reasons for that. And one of the reasons was that either you don't induce the right type of immune response. And in cancer vaccine, you need to have CD8 T cells, so-called CD8, which are killer cells that kill the tumors. And you need to have the CD4 or the helper T cells. And they need to also have a certain memory phenotype because you want your protection to be long-lasting. So again, some of the early questions were, well, if you activate immune system, but that doesn't lead to clinical activity, what do we do with this? And part of the solution of that problem was for some companies, well, maybe you need to test it in the different patient group. So in the metastatic population, if you have a technology that is maybe not so potent, then your cells are not enough to kill this tumor mass because these tumors can be quite large and also multiple. But if you go to, for example, adjuvant situation, which is after surgery, so for patients who are candidates for resection of the tumor, then the tumor is either completely resected, where some cells, residual cells are left, or resected in a meaningful way, and then your cells have to act on a much sort of smaller target. And the Moderna data that you mentioned was quite important, I think, for the whole field, because Moderna has shown for the probably first time that you can demonstrate clinical activity or efficacy with the vaccine. So they had a positive so-called proof of concept or a phase 2 trial in adjuvant melanoma. And that really lifted the whole field because somebody has shown that you can do it. And for us, this was quite meaningful because we were just by chance planning our fundraise at JP Morgan 2023. And this data, the top line data, went out at the end of 22. So that was quite a nice sort of message to start with, to say, hey, the cancer vaccines are validated as a modality, right? And then within that modality, there are different ways that you can tackle that. And again, I never believed that this is a winner takes it all kind of a game, and you can find different ways to address different stages of disease. And some technologies have really embraced this adjuvant or resectable population. We believe that we can make a difference in a metastatic population because, again, of the both potency and payload. And we have a very interesting population that I believe it's quite unique to the field, where we don't treat patients after surgery. We actually treat patients before the disease even shows. That's our so-called Lynch program, or the interception study. That's in phase 1. Yeah. That's done in collaboration with the NCI, or the National Cancer Institute in the US. And we have been very fortunate to be able to test this technology in this group of individuals who have a genetic predisposition to have mismatch repair deficiency because they have a mutation in one of the genes that control mismatch repair. Basically, your DNA gets broken, quote unquote, all the time, and then it gets repaired. And if that machinery for repair is broken, then mutations usually lead to cancer. And so these, I really didn't. I wasn't aware of Lynch, even though it's a quite prevalent condition. 1 in 300 people have it, so the population of prevalence is quite high. Most of the cases are not diagnosed, and one of the reasons for that is because there is really nothing to offer to these patients other than surveillance. The thing about these mismatch repair deficient tumors is that they are not discriminating between organs. So they can give you colorectal cancer, they can give you endometrial cancer if you're a woman, they can give you gastric cancer, ovarian, and others, but those are the most common ones, so GI and GU. And if you are an Lynch carrier, then you could have more than one cancer of the same organ or of different organs. So what these individuals usually do is undergo annual colonoscopies for colon, and then to monitor closely, and then women often undergo prophylactic surgeries after they have decided not to have children anymore. And those are pretty terrible choices, if you ask me. And so the idea that you can intercept, right? It's not prevention. It's really not prophylaxis, because it's not a vaccine that you give to everybody, but you're really targeting people who have much, much greater chance of getting cancer versus normal population. And you give them the vaccine so that you induce T cells that will do the surveillance for you and then catch cancer, or even pre-cancer situations like neoplasia in case of colon cancer, which will then be kept in check and really reduce that incidence.
And in this case, it's still an off-the-shelf approach.
It's an off-the-shelf.
But it's not in combination, I guess.
Exactly. It's a monotherapy. It's a monotherapy, exactly.
Yeah. And I think you will have some results on that one also soon, or you will announce soon.
We will announce soon results. So we have published the first set of 10 patients at the SITC conference at the end of last year, and that was an oral late-breaking abstract. It was received very well. Yeah. The quality and the breadth and the potency of immune responses that we have observed has really been unmatched with anything that I have seen, including our own metastatic data, by the way. And that has, and it was incredible, because after that presentation and publication, we started getting calls. We just closed Series C. We actually announced the close of the Series C around the same time in November of last year at Jefferies, and people started calling like, what is this thing? Can you tell me more about it? So we were busy. The Lynch kept us busy, both on the execution part, because we, of course, wanted to see what the final data set will tell us, but also on the sort of looking forward side. It's an incredibly exciting topic to talk about.
When I looked at your pipeline, I thought, okay, probably the phase 2 is the most important, already close to prior readout. But from what you said, it sounds like the two It's two pillars, really.
It is the same asset, right? It is the same compound. So it is this conglomerate of the collection of frameshift peptides or neoantigens. So these frameshift peptides are, in our view, quite important because they are foreign to the immune system. They come as a result of a mutation that leads to a shift in reading frame. So you lose a letter, you lose a base, and then as a consequence of that, you start producing gibberish, right? Which your system doesn't recognize. But it is foreign, and foreign things are usually good, right? Immune system recognizes something that's non-self, right? And then starts activating the right type of cells against it. So it is the same information that is given, but in two very different situations. One, where you treat a patient who has a disease, and in our case, this is in combination with Keytruda because Keytruda is the standard of care. But in the other way, you can actually, go into the high-risk population and intercept that disease and lead to potentially lowered incidence of that disease in the future. That is an incredibly exciting possibility that we are quite actively exploring.
Yeah, that's amazing. Talking about the fundraising, that's one thing that I saw. I mean, it was $72 million end of last year in 2023. Out of my memory in Europe, I mean, there's not that many rounds of that size, especially. I mean, there was Vectora, I think, was probably the largest one. Well, I think it was a Series A plus above 100 million, but otherwise, I mean, it's really large round. And you have a long list of investors and top investors from before coming in the round. I mean, one thing I can mention, I think I mentioned to you as well, is that Sophia from Andera came in, which I know her quite well, and I like the company she invested in, the people she invested in general. But can you tell a bit more on the maybe even the investor story, because I think it started. I mean, I think Versant was pretty early on, Abingworth was pretty early on, and then there's a long list of other VCs. So can you talk about it a little more?
No, I'm happy to. So Nouscom was founded in 2015, and it was founded by Versant and then LSP, now EQT. And Versant and LSP were also investors in Okairos. Okairos was the company that has the same scientific co-founders at Nouscom, and that was a great story also and success for those two investors, in addition to a few others. So Okairos was acquired by Glaxo just a year or two before Nouscom's story began. So this is maybe also a rare story of repeat entrepreneurs in Europe. And so when the founding team came back and said, we have an idea to, optimize technology, cancer neoantigens have become sort of a hot commodity. And Versant and LSP sort of jump on that and founded the company. I was actually a member of the Versant investment team at the time. So I heard a story about this phenomenal Okairos, success, and Ricardo Cortese, who was the founding CEO of both companies. And, that was kind of a myth within Versant. And I was, doing my thing, minding my own business for the most part. And then I was approached by a partner who was sitting, a Versant partner, Guido Magni, who was sitting on the board of Nouscom, and say, do you want to, they want to get involved and help out? My role was at the time both looking for new investments and working with the portfolio companies. And I said, sure, that sounds great. I came to this office and I spoke with Ricardo, and I sort of said, well, you don't need help. Like, you need a full-time somebody. It was very much research organization at the time, maybe 15 people, all of them in Rome. Ricardo was the only one who was here. So I said to him and to Versant, well, this sounds very intriguing, but I think they really need a full-time help. And so one thing led to the other. I became that full-time help. I was hired as the chief operating officer at first. Versant at the time, and LSP put in 12 million seed funding, or Series A, I think it was called.
At the time was small, but not that small.
Not that small, yeah.
Be small.
It was meaningful. I mean, it lasted for a good couple of years or even longer. And then sadly, Ricardo passed about a year after I joined the company in 2017. And Alfredo Nicosia, who was the CSO of Kairos, and he was then the CEO of Nouscom. Alfredo and I really, held hands and raised in 2017 a 42 million euro Series B. That's where Abingworth and 5am came in. And we then didn't raise until last year. So that was quite a long time. And the reason for that is because, we had non-diluting funding from a collaboration that we have with Janssen or J&J Innovations, I think it's called these days. They were quite fond of our technology and our approach and our manufacturing capabilities. And this is disclosed now, but we have had multiple collaborations, license and manufacturing collaborations over the years. And one of those programs actually entered the clinic in 2022. So that combined with our capital efficiency really allowed us to stretch the money and actually generate clinical data. And I think what was, we went out really at you can argue at the worst possible time in biotech industry, but, you need money and, you have to go and get it. So I think the few things came together for us in that fundraise. One was that we actually had clinical data. I think if we were a sort of a tell me story, then it wouldn't have gone that well. We were a show me story. So we had clinical data, we had good plans. As I mentioned, we wanted to run the right study to really show that the compound can work. We had a team that's with a track record of execution. And we had supportive investors who carried us not only through all those years, but actually actively participated in new financing. And so we were very pleased when in spring of 2023, we got a term sheet. That was a big deal. And we brought in, as you said, a long list of investors, because once we got one term sheet, sort of everything started coming together. And, all the investors we talked to and who were interested, but kind of, decided either to sit on the sidelines or were taking their time, they all of a sudden jumped in and said, well, I want to be part of this story. So we upsized the round from the original target. We were up to raise a little less than that. But we closed at, as you said, $75 million. And actually, this was extended earlier this year to something like 83 plus with the addition of Angelini Ventures. So we are quite happy that we were successful in closing the round, but not only that the round was upsized and allowed us more capital to do potentially more things. And last but not the least, the quality of investors, as you mentioned, Sophia and Andera Partners, M Ventures, BPI, France, Indacos, Angelini, XGen. I mean, these are really, really good quality European investors that sort of nicely complement the syndicate that we have in place.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. And I saw you have, coming with having a long list of investors, you have a lot of board members as well.
We do have.
I think you are one of
board.
The largest board I've seen in quite a few biotechs. I think it was, how many, like 12 or something?
We have 9.
Okay.
We have 9 board members, and then we have a few observers.
Okay, that's why they're all listed on the website.
Yeah, exactly. So they're all listed, but the board is technically 9 people. I mean, the Series B board was 8. So, from 8 to 9, it's not that big of a deal, but you're right. And I was just on a panel earlier this week related to another event, and it was about biotech boards. And, the question started with, how do you choose your board? How do you complement the expertise? And the first thing I said was, well, when you're a private company, your shareholders are your board. We are lucky to have, in addition to our shareholders, also an independent chairman who I work very closely with and who has been really fantastic support over the last years. And we also have another independent scientist who has been with us basically since the beginning of the journey and who really, really understands our technology. So it works. I guess that's the most important thing. It's big, but it works.
Yeah. I'm curious about the boards, if you have other lessons. I mean, some of, I think, at least Abingworth, they're not on the board anymore.
No,
I think.
No.
So you have replaced over the years, even if the investors, you have prioritized new investors, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, this is more of a shareholder matter, as I believe is common. So you cannot just add and add and add. But, we did keep most of the board members from before. We have replaced some and we added more.
Can you share a bit more on the board dynamics? Because I mean, board in every company, most companies have a board, but it can mean like very different things.
Yes.
I mean, in a public listed company or like whatever, Fortune 500 is very different than in a biotech, private biotech, than in a startup, than in whatever. But in biotech, I think, at least my understanding is that the investors is also pretty active, pretty hands-on boards as well. So can you elaborate a bit more on like what's the dynamics for your board and what were some of your lessons there? As well.
Yeah, there certainly are a few. So we operate through subcommittees. We have 3 subcommittees that are looking at different areas: our R&D, clinical strategy, finance and audit committee, and we have a remuneration committee. So the committees do the work, and we really quarterly, right? We update the committees on what's going on and where we need decisions, and then the chairs of those subcommittees then with the team, right, with me and the subset of the team then present to the board. And for the most part, this works reasonably well. Of course, the new board brings in new dynamics. So kind of the board has to get to know each other because some of the relationships are known, but in that context, right, most of the relationships are new. So in the beginning, I had to put an extra effort to just make sure that we are, on one hand, comfortable with the, information and communication. And on the other hand, this doesn't become sort of my only focus because, there is a balance to be made there. And I think when you talk about a Series C company that is running a global phase 2 trial, you have to believe that you have a management team in place who knows what they're doing, right? And the board's role is to oversee that and govern that and pressure test, but actually not run the company because that's the management job. We have a management team of 7.
It's quite fine line.
It is a fine line. It is a fine line, and at times there have to be perhaps some reminders of that. But again, as long as we actually do what we say we would, then that trust, right, starts building.
And create the trust over time as well.
You create trust over time, right? If you're credible, if you do what you say you will do, and you do it consistently, and over time, right, then the different board members become comfortable. And of course, some things are easier done than others. There of course are always questions, how about this, how about that? But you mentioned word focus a couple of times. I do remind occasionally board, then, well, we can do all of that, but, our priorities are 1, 2, and 3. So it was funny. There was one board meeting when I literally said, we can do 3 things well, and you want us to do 4, and you got to choose, right? And we chose.
I like that.
And we chose, I mean, again, the board is here. I think nobody on the board is here to be intentionally unhelpful or disruptive, not at all. But they're curious, right? And they're excited about their new investment and they want to see data. And, they want to be in the loop. So it all comes really from good place. And again, my job is to kind of consolidate all of that and say, all right, we are going to address this and this.
It's funny. I'm laughing because I have a similar experience at biotech with my board, where when you, at least my experience, when you bring a lot of smart people in the room, obviously everyone has smart questions to ask and everyone has smart inputs, but you can rapidly discuss things that are not pointy. So we learn quite a lot of like, what do we even put on the agenda or put on the slide, because once it's on the slide, it's on the screen and there's everyone watching, for sure you will discuss it.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily the most important, so that makes me laugh.
I had some training early in my career to prepare for that, and that was from my days at McKinsey. So I went from grad school to a consultancy, and of course this was a very different world. And the way that the teams operate within McKinsey, you have sort of a team that is a full-time on the study, and they kind of collect everything. They're a depositor of all the knowledge, and then you have partners who waltz in, a day a week and kind of, give support to the team, senior support to the team. But to your point, right? Like, these people are smart. They have seen a lot of things. And unless you're careful, they can easily become a firing missile. And if they're undirected, then that leads to explosions left and right. So one of the things that I was trained on is to control for that, or at least try to aim for that in the right way, so that you get your attention to where you want it. Because we do have, as any biotech, we do have hard questions to solve, and I think it would be quite interesting, right, to claim that you can do everything yourself. Not at all. There is a reason why you want all these smart people to help you. So what I am trying to do is really focus people on the problem that I have. Sometimes that requires answering the questions that they have, but I am not shy in asking for help, whether that is on the content or on, I want to talk to so-and-so and them, or whatever it is. I think the more you can use your board in a ways that they help you, the better. Because if not, they're going to come up with questions of their own, and then you will have to deal with that.
That's a good one. It's also a really good transition. I wanted to go a bit on your personal background. You mentioned McKinsey. I think you are originally from Croatia, right? Yeah.
That's right. I was born there.
Yeah, you're born there. And then can you elaborate a bit more on I think you started, or your undergrad, I don't remember where your undergrad was, but you went to the US. So can you elaborate a bit on this transition?
How did all that happen? Yeah, so I was born and raised in Croatia, and I actually finished my undergrad there, and my major was computational chemistry, and that was a pretty new field 25 years ago, and I was eager to, go and learn and study under somebody who was a world class, so I was very determined to, do something with that. And so it was a very interesting process back in the day when, internet was still, emails existed, but I remember having all these envelopes on the table with all these paper applications, etc. Long story short, I was accepted to quite a few, actually, graduate programs, and one of them was at Yale with Bill Jorgensen, who was, quite a name in the field of computational chemistry. And so it didn't take a lot of arm twisting to make that call. It was a big decision to pack up.
It's been really hard to get this graduate position. I can imagine, at least also a bit my experience of finishing my studies in the US, and I've seen it's possible, but it takes...
It's a fairly selective process.
Selective, and I can imagine in the 2000s must be...
Yeah. This was in 99, actually.
Not just internet, but also maybe the world was a bit less open. I mean, Croatia was not part of Europe. And you have quite some.
We were coming out of the war in the early 90s. So yeah, it was. I mean, if I knew at the time all of this, I would probably maybe be intimidated. But when you're young and you just don't know any better, you're kind of naive, and you're like, well, that sounds like a great school, and I have good grades, and I will go and take a couple of tests and fill a few forms and go for it. And I was thrilled. I still actually remember the day when the Yale letter came, and I was like, oh my God, this is happening. And those 5 years at Yale were probably one of the best that I remember, because I haven't just been growing as a professional. Actually, literally was discovering the world, beyond this small country, sort of in the middle of Europe. And this was fantastic. And of course, I didn't know what McKinsey was, not only when I came there, but not even after. But they showed up on campus one day when I was, close to finishing my PhD studies. And I kind of got intrigued by the value proposition that they put out there. So I went through another fairly selective process. Again, probably I didn't know any better. I was just, well, let's see what happens and what this fuss is about.
Maybe it was less big than it is now, McKinsey, maybe, but still, it was already.
It was a pretty big deal, but I think what McKinsey was doing at the time is putting more emphasis on recruiting non-MBA students and, sort of putting focus on so-called APDs, or advanced professional degrees. That's why they went to some schools and their PhD departments or law departments or med school students, and they figured that the training that you get in those disciplines actually is quite useful in business, and it just offers a different way of thinking than candidates and people who just kind of grow through a business school. So I think they were trying to increase that footprint.
You're more technical as well.
More technical and just
needed for some projects or strategy projects.
Yeah,
more analytical.
It was analytical, but it was also just the whole problem-solving process, right? Is different for a scientist than for a non-scientist. And I think McKinsey believed that there is a value in that when you have some knowledge and you learn business, that can be a very powerful combination. And I, the 5 years that I spent at McKinsey in Chicago were also a great learning. I really look at those as training, really. Training on the job. So instead of going to business school.
Life is, I guess, training over training over training. We keep learning this.
Indeed.
Okay.
And so, but consultancy is a consultancy, right? You are kind of a guest somewhere and you, work on a problem, but I never got to see any of my projects being implemented. And so after some time, I wanted to actually work in the industry. I wanted to have an operational job. And that's where Novartis sort of came into the equation. I also wanted to be back in Europe for personal reasons. So
you did 10 years in the US.
10 years in the US. And so it kind of felt like it's time to come back, at least on the continent, on the same continent. So that's what brought me to Basel. And Novartis was a great part of that journey. I spent now 14 years in Basel. 7 were with Novartis, and the rest was with Versant and Nouscom.
Yeah. Nice. How was it, the transition from big pharma to Versant or to Nouscom? I guess must have been also a pretty big decision for you, right?
It was. I love Novartis.
The best. Yeah. Versant, they have quite a few Novartis pharma people.
Yes.
No. Guido was also.
No, Guido was ex-Roche, but he was at Versant for quite a while before I came. But you're right. Claire and Carlo and Gerald have been either at both McKinsey and Novartis, or at least at one of them. I don't know if that was by design, but I was actually recruited by one of them out of Novartis, which I liked. I learned a lot. I worked in areas of neuroscience and oncology. I was in commercial roles. I was in development roles. You actually learn how the whole thing works. But a big company is a big company. And I actually was starting to get a little bit irritated by constant push to choose your path, right? I was selected for this executive female leadership program that David Epstein sponsored and cared about very much. And I was being given advice that I should really choose whether I want to be a commercial person or development person. And I was like, but I kind of want to do both. And that, that was one of the factors that sort of kept on coming up in all the discussions. And it was really the opportunistic, right? Versant was growing their office, their presence in Basel. At the time, I believe they thought that the science in Europe is of very good quality and they can do good deals here because of the, different valuations. And so it was a big decision to do that switch. It wasn't maybe that difficult. It just felt very natural. I was very intrigued by being able to think about science again because, I didn't really think about science. It was more about, commercial and putting things together, navigating the big organization, getting your stuff done within that context. So I was allured by this. Okay, you work with different, with smart people, with a good team. You do a lot of interesting things, earlier stuff, science. So I was lured by that. And I'm also glad, like, the transition to Nouscom was, as I said, a no-brainer almost because I knew the team and I liked them instantly. There was a very good chemistry between us, and we've had a lot of fun on the journey.
That's amazing. I like how always often when you look backwards, how things connect and how things, I guess, how things make sense always backwards and your story. I mean, there's so many things that are very connected.
It is, and in hindsight, it's easier to explain and some choices and rationale. At the time, not everything was so obvious, and I had to be a bit brave in a few of these cases or crossroads and just believe that you can do something. Both moving across the world, right, was the first one, and then leaving everything behind, right, and going into this world of business was a shock at first because you just you're an expert of something and then you're kind of in kindergarten the other day. It takes some humility to go through that.
Can you imagine it? So I think it's a great inspiration, great story for some of our, let's say, younger audience or someone in the 30s or still hesitating or where to go. But I think what I'm thinking as well, I mean, also in my case, it can be a bit intimidating as well to see, okay, or like to already know, oh, this path can work. And so, but I think for your case, what you mentioned is like you didn't know or you didn't calculate, okay, I will go first to McKinsey and strategy consulting, and then I go to a big corporate, and then I go to start. I mean, no. At your time, maybe there was less access to information as well, but I think sometimes a bit of naivety and not knowing too much maybe can help. I don't know.
I think you have to have also a little bit of luck along the way for the right thing to happen for you at the right time. I mean, luck is also useful in fundraising. You have to have a little bit of luck there. As I said, we really went out at the right time. But it's
funny when you mentioned some of the Moderna data, I wrote down luck timing that we could discuss that because I think
no, it's people ask me what's your secret, right? I got a lot of calls and a lot of questions like, how did you do it? And you have to have the fundamentals right. You have to have a good story. You have to have good science. You have to have data. You have to be a good team who because investors are investing in technology and teams and people, right? Somebody has to actually execute it. And you have to have a little bit of luck. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I don't know how you quantify, but, it kind of has to happen. And it doesn't always work in your favor, but in our case, I think it did.
The quantifying is it's a topic I'm thinking about quite a bit at the moment. I mean, just as we discussed as well, I mean, the podcast and what we discussed, the market in biotech right now is not great. And so even for the podcast, I mean, having the guest side, some guests are not in a good situation. They don't want to talk at the moment, but that's okay. But more like for us, so advertisement budgets are just basically not there at the moment. Yeah. So that's tough, but it's very hard, I think. Maybe you can elaborate on this as well, or you've had this experience as well. When you have been lucky, then you can recognize that was luck. But when you're, let's say, unlucky and unlucky, it sounds more like an excuse and sounds more like it's. I feel like it's hard to find that balance and to quantify it.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah. But I think the word that I used when I was describing this was a tailwind. It's sort of like a nice analog from our daily life, because we're on airplanes all the time, right? So it's a tailwind or a headwind. You just get a little bit of a push. I mean, still, you can have all the luck you want. If you don't have a good fundamentals and a good team and a good data, it won't work either. But some companies, to your point, today or these days are in difficult situations, and there's nothing they're doing wrong. No. It's just that, investors are being pickier. They're looking for more specific things. They're taking their time. I think we did raise our round in a reasonable amount of time, but the B round was much faster. From big meeting to a term sheet to a contract was faster. Okay, it was a smaller syndicate, but still, decision-making process was different. So it is tough out there, and some are not going to make it, and that's maybe not due to anything that they're doing.
I like this headwind. I like a lot to do the fundamentals and do what's in your control. Yeah. Do it well. Then the rest is, inshallah, whatever. it's tailwind, headwind. A lot of things are out of control, and you can put that like out of control as luck, but there is.
As an entrepreneur or a biotech executive, you kind of have to have that mentality, because by definition, you don't control everything, right? You don't control the markets, you don't control investor sentiment, you don't control interest rates, you don't control geopolitical, nightmares. There are a lot of things you don't control, so you kind of have to really believe that if you do things that you can control right, that, this will lead to something. And it helps to kind of have and focus on near-term things. And it's really like every day you kind of get up and you do stuff until you can't, right? Like, if you come up against the wall, then you either find a way to break through or go around it, or you don't, right? And it's a different mindset than in a big company. And I found this environment to suit me better. Some people are struggling with making that transition, because there is something about the comfort of the pace of the big company and support, right? You're a phone call away from anything that you want, whereas we have to be a little bit creative in how we find information and how we figure things out. So in some ways, it's a bit personal.
Yeah, that's a good transition to one thing you control is focus. At least I think.
Yeah. You decide what is the priority.
So can you? I think you mentioned it a few times, and I think you are. What I was quite surprised that you have a pretty small team for running a global trial, and I guess this comes automatically, or you have to be more focused, I can imagine. Can you elaborate a bit on, I don't know, you yourself, or some examples of yourself where with focus or of the team, where, or some examples that show that you are, or some learnings on the focus side of things.
Yeah. So we are now a team of about 60. We grew since the financing closed. But to your point, right, if you run a global trial in 6 countries and 40 sites, then this actually is not a lot, but we do have most functions that you would expect to have in a company of our stage, from research to clinical to technical to finance and business. And I've been incredibly proud of the organizations that we have built and the team that is in place now, and most of them have been with us for years. So that's been terrific. And the best example of focus I can give you was last year, right? We had to raise money, and that was the only thing we had to do. And we were doing that and running the trial, right? Like, we sort of put everything else a little bit on hold and put all of our energy into executing the trial so that we have, because that was part of the story, the investment story. And just having this...
You don't want to pause the trial.
You don't want to pause the trial, no, because we really believe that it will work. And going in a very disciplined way after investors and telling your story and moving that process forward, following up, not being discouraged or disappointed, right? Because this was even with our ingredients that I believe were good that we had. It was not everybody's cup of tea, right? For some, we were too early. For some, we were too late. It's just the nature. And so you just kind of have to, let that go and don't be discouraged and just keep on going. So things were simple, but difficult.
Yeah.
We have a little bit different problematic now, which is we have possibilities and we have capital that we can put to work behind those possibilities, and you have to make choices. And here you have to, as I mentioned, one of the discussions I've had with the board this year was, they wanted sort of everything. And I said, time out, right? We can do this and this and that. So that's what we can do and that's what I can promise. This doesn't work, right? So we need to think about, right, how do we do that and what do we not do instead? And they understood that. So prioritization is something you have to do in biotech. You have to always
say no to certain.
Always make sure that you're spending your time on the right thing. And in my case, I always have to spend time on things that nobody else wants to spend time on, either because they won't or they can't. I think you're self-selecting a bit in this job for, dealing with problems which are not always fun, right? I mean, sometimes they are. I sometimes get pulled into fantastic discussions, but sometimes you're left with...
You have to get it done.
You have to get it done, and if it's not get done before it comes to you, then you sort of have to tackle it.
But one thing I like a lot on focus, or one sentence is, saying yes to something is saying no to something else. And when you think it that way, then if you take the list of 4 things, if you say yes to 4 things, you say no to, or you say no to something else. Or then
because in biotech, execution is really key because it's time, right? Time is your worst enemy in a way, because everything is always, are you on time with this? Are you on time with recruitment? Are you on time with data? And if you're not, then it's a problem. So time is a precious commodity. And we are very mindful about that. Our CFO, there was a meeting in which our CFO, she actually calculated how much it costs. A meeting, like it was a 2-hour big meeting. It was a preparation for something. And, sort of unprovoked, she said at the end, well, this just cost us X. I don't remember what it was.
Thousands of euros a 2-hour meeting. It's crazy.
So she said, let's just be clear. This is what this costs us. So, you better turn on.
Makes you focused sometimes when you see.
You better make the most of it. And we also value in-person time. We're a global company, right? We are present here. Our footprint is in Italy. Lab and manufacturing are in Italy. We have finance team part of the finance team is in US. And we have a few people also in UK. So we are a global company. And most of us met this week in Rome. And we do treasure this time in person because so much can get done effectively when you're actually sitting like this and looking at something and drawing on the whiteboard and not just staring at the Zoom screens or Teams screens.
Same for the podcast. I mean, having a conversation offline is like, it's not comparable to, I do a few online, but it's really not the same. Like,
no, nothing. It really cannot replace. But I think we learned to also leverage the virtual meetings in a better way, right? Before COVID, you would get on a plane for an hour meeting in US, and now
it's an expensive meeting, especially
expensive.
time that
Very expensive meetings, and some meetings you probably should, but maybe for some, maybe not for all.
It's good to have the options, I guess. Too.
Yeah, hybrid.
For the funny story, and for switching topic, but there's a company, I think it's called Shopify in the US, and in their agenda they put the cost of every meeting automatically. I don't know how precise it is, but basically every meeting 1 hour you will see, if you invite 8 people, will see the costs. And then you think, first you will think before sending the invite. And then when you run it,
I remember I was in a meeting at Novartis with David Epstein. It was some sort of a presentation to the PEC, the Pharma Executive Committee.
He was the CEO of Novartis Oncology.
He was the CEO of Novartis Oncology, but then he was the CEO of Novartis Pharma. And he calculated that in disease area X that was discussed, that a patient dies every, I don't know how often. And at the end of the meeting, he said, a patient just died, and what are we doing? I mean, he was, I think, rightfully calling the people and instilling the sense of urgency that, running around Basel and sitting in boardrooms and flipping through PowerPoints is, needed to bring people. But, he was really trying to say this is real, right? People are dying every day from this condition, and we have something that might help. And how are we getting it out there? I think he was real. He really lived his passion, and I think he still does.
That's a great story. Maybe one kind of last topic before the last part. I want to talk about a bit gender diversity as well. For the podcast, I'm trying to bring a bit more diversity on the show, and it's been not that easy. But I'm glad I had amazing female and also more ethnic diversity on the show. And one stat, and to be honest, also with you, it's not easy to find, especially on CEO positions, female CEO. So I was super excited to talk to you as well and to hear what you like. Yeah, how do you feel about it? How is your experience like? Yeah.
I think Nouscom is a very special company in that way because not only is a female-led, but most of our management team is female. We have 2 male executives and 5 female executives. And vast majority of our employees are female. I think it's 80%, something like 80%. So this is a bit going in the other direction. And I have to say, I didn't first of all start that. When I joined Nouscom, it was already like that. Ricardo and Alfredo were around, but most of the people in the company were women. And I remember asking Alfredo, how come? And he said, they're great. and most of them actually were his former students or postdocs or people that kind of followed him around. And as we built the company, I was always focused on getting the right people in the job. But I was happy when, for example, Tiffany joined us, our CFO. She actually recruited her when she was in Basel, and Loredana, our head of manufacturing and CMC. And they have started recruiting, women. And we have been even joking to say, well, are there any men qualified for this job or what's going on? So our environment, I think it's quite special. And we have created, place and conditions that can support that because our organization is also quite young. I think the average age is about 40. And that carries with itself, right? Of course, certain things that you have to work with and have flexibility for. That is, of course, in contrast with most funds that you meet, with most investors that you meet. So I kind of have seen both sides of it. I have not, in the early part of my professional journey, I really didn't think about it too much because McKinsey, for example, was such an, meritocracy that all that matter is what you have to say about something, irrespective of your tenure, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of anything, right? All they cared about is, can you add value to this problem solving and actually push everybody. It was very specific also to the culture of the company and the focus on people. So I really didn't think about it a lot at the time. And then, as I said, I was quite fortunate when I was at Novartis to be, selected and recognized for this program that I mentioned, this Executive Female Leadership, or EFLP, where I connected with a group of female leaders, and we each got a sponsor. Usually a male sponsor, because that was the composition of the executive team, whose job was, and it was deliberately called a sponsor, not a mentor, because their job was to sponsor you in the organization. So I felt quite privileged to have had opportunities to work in environments that either recognized or cared for equality and for diversity. Biotech is a little different because, again, I think funds are still predominantly male, although, there is some diversity there. I was actually just this week with one of my investors, and I was happy to see that they're 50-50. That's quite unusual. But they are predominantly male, especially the senior level. Exactly, the partner or the managing partner level. And whether we like it or not, then you kind of you support what you understand or like or know. So I think the change has to also come through, in the investor groups and communities, even before or in parallel as it comes to biotechs. And private biotechs in particular, because you don't have any NASDAQ rules or you don't have any other, government mandates, who you have to have on the board and or the management team. So, I have kind of gotten into a situation where, diversity is not only welcome, it's kind of a way of life, or it's even dominant. But it, I was in a situation where this was not the case. And so I was made aware of that. I have 2 kids, they're both girls. So I think about that also in the context of, the next generation and what the world will be like for them, and hopefully easier than what it's been for me on what is for me.
It sounds like it's still a overall pretty positive experience, because I heard some stories where it's really not that positive, and it's very sad to hear, actually.
Yeah. No, I have to say I was fortunate in that sense that for the most part I was supported, and I think it comes from, again, your credibility and your ability to actually get the job done and deliver. And once you do that, then this kind of comes a little bit to the background.
We could have a focus on the fundamentals.
Yes.
I guess it's whatever your gender thing, if you focus on the fundamentals, I think it probably helps.
Yes.
That's good. I wrote down as well, I heard from at Bioequity, there was I think it was from McKinsey, actually, a report that in private biotech in Europe, you had only 11% of female CEOs, which I found first, I think was pretty representative from accurate to what I have in mind, but it seems very low. Yeah. But I think it's also, how do you feel about the change also? Because I think it's changing, but maybe not changing fast enough. But I feel like there is some change.
There is progress. I have a network of peers in Europe and in US, and of course you kind of self-select, right? And it gets developed over time, and it's very helpful. And it's very helpful to have peer group, full stop, right? Of CEOs in general, because it is a very peculiar job. And when people, I remember when I was earlier in my career and I was reading like, oh, it's lonely. And I was like, well, how lonely can it be,
Lonely at the top, right?
But it is lonely at the top because there are some things that you really cannot talk about with anybody, not your team, not your board. You kind of have to figure out how you're going to approach certain things, or how you're going to, solve certain situations, or even how you give yourself energy to go through all of that, so that every day you break through walls and not sort of get stopped by them. And so it's helpful to have that kind of support group, that peer group, where you can call somebody and they know exactly, right, what you're going through. And I have a few of those where I can just text and say, can we talk? And they immediately know, okay, you're up to something, and you just kind of have to get it out and at least hear that you're not completely insane, and that you're thinking about things in the right way. Yeah. But yeah, to your point on the female numbers, I think we could do better in biotech in general, and in the private biotech in particular. And I really welcomed Sophia's participation in the board. Not just because she's a woman, but she's actually a great board member. And she is, helpful in, sparring and thinking through some ideas. So again, it's just a different way of, it's a different dynamic sometimes.
Yeah, that's good. It's great. To finish, I had done that for episode 20, so you will be the second time. It's kind of a quick fire, just some yes and no simple questions, and some one sentence answer. What's your favorite biotech book?
My favorite biotech book is Bad Blood.
Bad Blood? Wow.
It's quite a story.
That's quite a story. The Thanos story here.
Yeah.
What's on top of your mind at the moment?
What's on top of my mind at the moment is actually our Lynch study, and how do we turn that possibility into a real opportunity for us and for patients.
What's favorite? But what's the most impressive drug on the market for you at the moment? Obesity drugs are certainly making a lot of headways. Not exactly my area of expertise, but they seem to be quite popular. Is Basel the best biotech hub in Europe?
I would say yes to that. Even though I was told ahead of time, do not get yourself fit into yes or no questions.
Oh, really?
I would say yes to this one. I'm actually involved with a BioValley, the organization here, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think.
If not the best, it's pretty. It's at the top.
How much do you sleep per night?
7-8 hours.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep a healthy balance.
For CEO, especially, it's good. Who is one of your biotech heroes?
It's hard. It's hard to choose one. There are many. I
mentioned David Epstein. Maybe.
I mentioned David, who is of course very famous, but I'm actually going to add another one who is a friend and maybe not so well known, but Paula Reagan. I met her when she was building the company that was spun out of Sanofi, and she actually has put a drug on the market. So I'm very inspired by her story, and she did it in very, in a typical biotech way, but she's my personal, somebody that I admire a lot.
Great. I think that's a great way to finish the
Thank you for that fire drill. It was fun.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Philip.
I'm impressed by Marina's story. how it mixes curiosity, perseverance, humility, and a dose of luck. I'm also impressed by Nouscom platform, especially the phase 1 and the phase 2 running. And I can imagine in 2025, there could be a big value inflection point, especially if the clinical results are positive. So keeping my fingers crossed for her and for the team. If you have enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow, review button. Any of these actions would help more people get access to this podcast. If you want to see similar videos, please check out the channel where we have many more. I would be also curious to hear what you think. So if you could comment wherever you are or shoot me an email at Philip@Flot.bio. All right. Thanks for watching to the end and catch you in the next episode.